right, we're kicking it off. Very cool.
Morning,
Welcome, everybody.
everybody.
People are still trickling in. Thank you so much for joining on the Thursday. This is awesome. We are here with Helena Aryafar. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Helena?
Yes,
Okay. We covered it's not Helena, and I tried to remember,
correct.
like, it's Mount Saint, and then I forgot how you pronounce that one too. So it's Helena Aryafar. And Dr. Amy Cook. We'll get to introductions in a minute, but thank you so much for coming. The topic of today is your RevOps is showing, and we're going over RevOps strategy for the AI era, specifically in 2026. So I'm going to turn it over to some quick introductions. Let's go with Helena first with interos.ai. Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe the top 30 to 60 seconds, and the goal is don't be too humble or shy. Really lay it on
Ah.
thick on us. Where have you been? What have you done?
Well, I'm head of revenue operations at interos.ai. I come from a very non-traditional uh, RevOps background. I started more in the sciences doing general operations. I was doing a lot of field and lab research. Operations was kind of a necessary part of what I was doing, both for actually getting data out the door, but also just to do more with less. And then it turns out that there are a lot of parallels between what I was doing there and in go to market. And so I made that transition, I don't know, about a little less than maybe 10 years ago, and never looked back.
Excellent. Well, we're happy you made that transition. That's amazing. We're happy that you're here today. Thank you so much. And then no stranger to the group here, we have Dr. Amy Cook, our CMO and co-founder at Fullcast. Amy, how are you? Please introduction again, 30, 60 seconds. Don't be shy.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to be here with everyone and really appreciate you coming. It is, let's see, my background is I also came from a non-traditional RevOps background, started in marketing, ran a marketing agency for 15 years, and I ended up doing a ton of RevOps because at the time there was no name for it. So everybody just said, hey, marketing, you do it. And then in 2016, people are like, "Oh, no, let's, like, bucket around this," and there is a name for this, revenue operations. So it's a really exciting time to be part of it. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, both of you. And I am the lucky one who gets to moderate. My name is Nathan, Director of Marketing. I doubt anybody cares who I am or where I've been. I've
We
joined.
definitely care, Nathan. Give us your background.
Well, I was born on a warm summer day. No, I'm kidding. I director of marketing. I was with Copy AI for 3 years, and then we were recently acquired by Fullcast. So now part of the Fullcast team is director of marketing here, and just getting to learn from Dr. Amy Cook every day, which is just a blast. So we're gonna dive in. Like I said, nobody cares. I get to moderate this. I'm very excited. But I will hop in and just talk about some of the broken engine symptoms that we're seeing across RevOps right now. With the advent of AI, not to overuse a phrase there, we're just seeing a lot of things that aren't working the way that they used to. And we're seeing this not just in marketing or sales or CX, but again, across the board with all revenue operations. Some of the things that we're seeing in terms of symptoms are lead disputes, so constant friction over who owns what, some territory gaps where organizations are failing to assign territories on time and keeping up with the real-time need that they usually have. And then dirty data. So ops spending 80% of the time in just manually cleaning up spreadsheets and trying to figure out what data makes sense, how to align it with tools that carry this data and the silos that it holds in this. And the results, Guy Rubin's on the call with formerly EPSTA, now Fullcast Revenue Intelligent. Their 2025 benchmarks report that we'll send out with this as well showed that 78% of sellers missed quota in the last year. Yeah, it's Guy saying hi. Helena, I wanted to know, you had a great background in both lab and field research. How has your scientific perspective helped you spot invisible friction points where a company's GTM engine is starting to break down? And how has that changed over the past couple of years for you?
Yeah, I mean, I never really let go of the fundamentals of my scientific background. So I bring the scientific method, as silly as that sounds, into go to market and operations in general. And it's kind of as easy as just going from the basics of like observation, hypothesis, test, you measure result. Like that framework still exists. And that's how I do root cause analysis. And the important part of that, and I've mentioned this a lot in past conversations with people, but I typically look for patterns rather than anecdotes because, outliers aren't always helpful for understanding underlying problems. They can be indicators, but the reality is like a pattern is much more important. Is it happening repeatedly and what specifically is going on? And so I kind of treat go to market as a living system. And, I'm trained for science where, you notice when a system behaves inconsistently or outside of what you would expect. And symptoms can basically be a signal of something upstream being off. And I just apply that to go to market.
I love that. I've never heard that explained so clearly of applying the scientific method to go to market or RevOps. And it is just from the scientific background. How have you found that it helps? Do you find that your colleagues in the RevOps space tend to do the same, or are they more focused on those
I
outliers?
I think they do. I think everyone in ops inherently, if you're successful in ops, especially if you're able to identify what's wrong and then figure out like, okay, this is signal, this is noise. It's because you're inherently doing that process. You just don't realize you're doing it. So in science, it's very explicit, and you're required to label it as these are my observations. This is my hypothesis. Now I'm testing, and here are the results. But in ops, that happens every time. Every time you're looking for insights, every time you're trying to figure out, well, where did it go wrong? You inherently, I think, tease out what is a legitimate pattern and what's kind of a one-off. Like, oh, I don't know. That probably went sideways because this rep specifically does things slightly different. That's actually just noise. They're able to overcome that later down the funnel. It's really not a big deal. It doesn't impact the overall behavior. And so it's not something I need to necessarily address as a problem of what was identified elsewhere.
What a terribly practical approach. I love that so much. And Amy, I would be curious because you come more from the agency background and a very creative, I mean, as a musician, creativity, and then starting the agency. Have you ever labeled it like the scientific method? I think you go
I have actually.
through.
It's funny because Helena and I had this discussion on when she was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. I also have an academic background. My PhD is in organizational rhetoric, and I was trained in mixed methods in both qualitative and quantitative analysis. And so, in our book that Ryan Balla and I wrote called "The RevOps Advantage" that was published last year,
Not planned at all. I'm not kidding.
so there's a whole chapter in there about the scientific method and how to use the scientific method to diagnose and solve all of your RevOps problems. And so I fully agree with that. And it's actually really interesting. I've got a little anecdote about this. When I was running the agency, I was called in to be a consultant for a company who was having a lot of problems between their sales and marketing teams. And the marketing team said, I don't know what the sales team's problem is, but they are not converting any of my leads. We are absolutely crushing our goals. We have no problems whatsoever. The sales team said, these are bad leads. I mean, right? It's like just that same story, right? These are just terrible leads. So the CEO hired me and said, I want you to find out what's actually going on. He said, I suspect that these leads are not good. I suspect this. And I said, okay. So I talked with the sales lead, I talked with the marketing lead, I talked with the RevOps lead, and I asked the RevOps lead to put me on every single lead form that came in. So this is back to our data collection, right? Because I needed to do the analysis, the root cause analysis that Helena was talking about. And so, they were like, they pushed back really hard. They were like, that is so inefficient. Like, why would you ever do that? It's already integrated and it's going directly into Salesforce, and the sales team's picking it up. And I said, well, I just want to see it. And so they gave me they finally did it. It took me a long time to get them to agree. And what was happening was the paid leads that were coming in were they had gotten onto this bot system where their competitors were sending bots to eat up all of their spend at the beginning of the day. So their competitors' ads would show, but theirs weren't. And so there were just a ton of fake leads that were going into their system, and they were calling them real leads, and it was messing with their lead conversion. So that kind of scientific analysis is incredibly important, and it has to be done. And if you have somebody like Helena who's on the RevOps team looking very carefully, you can be sure that those problems between sales and marketing are going to go down a lot.
Helena, do you see a lot of friction between the sales and marketing teams still trying to coordinate? I know that I've worked on teams in the past and it's like marketing has their own data set and then sales has their own, and it turns into this weird version of like the Hunger Games, at least where I am, but I don't want to get too anecdotal. I'm just wondering if you've seen that too from the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's generally just how the game goes, and you can throw in insert name here of any additional cross-functional business unit to that as well. And it's like, I think the issue is everyone feel like they fight over ownership, but really the thing they're fighting over are definitions and alignment on what they're calling something and what they agree to of this is what we're saying it is. And usually if you address it that way and you align on definitions at the onset, you can kind of circumvent, not all of it, but a lot of the friction points early on. Because
Yeah.
that's typically what ends up happening. Like, exactly what Amy was talking about of like, this is garbage. No, it's not. Well, what is garbage? Right? Like, what is it? So one person's garbage is someone else's gold. So if you align on that at the onset, then you can say, well, I don't consider this valuable. And at least you're coming to the table understanding why you're having the dispute. And it's not about, I'm calling it garbage and you're not. It's okay, we can agree that it's garbage. Now we need the next layer of this. So
That is
yeah, it's
super
always there.
interesting. The subjectivity of definitions even
Yeah.
around, like you said, what is garbage? We're going to talk about single sources of truth later. I am going to ask a bit more on that dirty data or even the narrative of data. I had a marketer once tell me, and it gave me a cringy feeling, which was I can make the data say anything I need it to, and I hated that. And so do you find a human component around data interpretation that can be more subjective from that scientific lens?
1,000%. Again, though, I mean, it's also about definitions, and that subjectivity isn't inherently bad. I think it really just is subjectivity without providing what the caveats and assumptions are is bad, because then you leave people to make their own assumptions off of what you've already applied assumptions to. And that's where you'll see them using your insights and starting to make really bold statements about things, and you're like, whoa, 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 that's not what that was actually. That's not the story it was really telling, even if you're thinking it is. And so I'm, probably to an annoying degree, I'm very explicit about it until I get told to pull back, just because I would rather know more going in, understanding what limitations were and deciding, okay, I'm okay if we don't call this out, but I know when I speak to it, like if I'm doing a deck or helping prep someone for their conversation, that they understand the caveat. They can choose to not explicitly show it, but they're not then going the second step and just making these bold claims and being like, oh, I don't know if how many of these were potential outliers or how many this or that. So I try and over index on that. But yeah, again, I think it really is just like a misalignment of agreeing to, the information I know, and this is what I was calling it when I told you X, Y, and Z.
Oh, okay. I need to change slides, otherwise I will stay on this slide for literally ever because
I was going to say the same thing. I'm like, it really, like what you're saying is so relevant, in my opinion, in terms of assumptions. Like, for example, let's say that a company has a surge of pipeline and they went from, 3x pipeline to 5x pipeline coverage in 1 quarter. And everyone was so excited. And nobody went into the data and inspected the quality of the pipeline, right? We might be thinking, oh, that quality is just going to be consistent all the way throughout. We just have way more pipeline. But if you don't go in and inspect it and look at the assumptions that Helen is talking about, if you have crappy pipeline going into there just for like a short-term gain to meet bookings goal or to meet those goals, then 3 quarters later, you're going to see it fall out of the bottom and nobody's going to know why. And so, what you were saying, Helena, about those assumptions is so important.
Yeah, when we talk about those assumptions and like you said, people falling out of the bottom, that's the perfect transition into this. We hear about leaky buckets, we hear about customer experience. That revenue leakage from unbalanced territories and missed coverage, we're all familiar with that. We all know that fragmented planning can create a bad experience for the customers. Helena, I was wondering, in your experience, when it comes to a disjointed customer experience, when you're seeing things more holistically, not just from a marketing lens, not just from a sales lens, not just from a customer lens, what are some of those costs that people aren't really thinking about when all of this disjointedness comes down to the actual customer themselves and their experience?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think, we know that that disconnect internally slows teams down. So it's just like horribly inefficient and ineffective when there isn't alignment and people aren't on the same page. But as a customer, that tends to manifest as either repetition, delays, like inconsistent messaging, gaps. So either you have too many people following up, nobody following up, the handoff was clumsy. They're going through their customer journey and they're having to repeat themselves 1,000 times because it wasn't clear what was supposed to be someone's responsibility to get information from point A to point B. Uh, all of that. And I think in ops, like we buy tools too, right? We are customers as well. You feel that. So when they don't know what's going on, that internal friction of finger pointing, that's usually what ends up happening. That's also one of the signals that something's off upstream, right? People are like arguing about who owns what. It's usually that debate that should trigger you to go, oh, hold on, there's a problem here. But that internal friction ends up creating external inefficiency or inconsistency. And that kind of what ends up hitting your revenue. That's where you get revenue leakage because they don't care. As a customer, when a vendor is interacting with me and they don't have their life together, like go check yourself. I don't care. It just feels unprofessional and it ends up putting me off. And I actually had a vendor that I parted ways with because it was wild. It was a flat renewal that we were going through, and there were 5 people on the call. And every time I talked to them, there was a new person added on. And I'm like, are you bringing your mailman and his dog or your aunt's friend's sister's cousin? Like, what is going on? Who are these people? And why do I have to repeat again what we talked about 4 other times? And they're like, oh, well, I'm your sales rep, but this guy is your account manager. We have the technical CSM, and then we have the account CSM, and we also have a renewal specialist. I'm like, get it together. I don't care. Like, I don't care. And it comes off abrasive when you're talking to them, be like, I have like 5 more of these same calls just to get my platform renewed. Like, I got 99 problems, and like this shouldn't be one of those because those are all on top of this. Please check yourself. Is everything okay at home? Because this was not okay.
Oh, I love that. So I have 99 problems and this should not be one of them. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that. And Amy, one thing I wanted to put you on the spot here a little bit. One thing I've really enjoyed about coming to Fullcast was seeing how closely you work as a CMO with our CRO, with our other C-suite leadership. And it's not just like you don't view marketing as a silo. And I don't think it's any surprise that our NRR is pretty high. It's very good. I wanted to ask how you built a positive relationship with those other C-suite folks in a way that we can work as a team sport rather than a team sport where you have everyone kind of doing their own goals. And then at the end, you have 4 different people on a call, like Helena was saying, each trying to
Because
justify.
everybody needs their piece of the pie.
It's
Yeah,
exactly.
I that was a great question, and Helen, a great example of what can happen on the customer side when you are not aligned internally. I've never heard a customer say that as an outcome of this before, but it absolutely is. That was really like elucidating to me. For me, thank you for saying that. I just think we have the best CRO ever, so it's easy to get along with them very well. But Pete and I make a really concerted effort to talk with each other. We usually talk on the phone every day. We also get into each other's business all the time because when we're looking at I look at things as more of a flywheel than a funnel. I don't know about you, Helena, but because renewals are so important, that customer success motion really is more like the customer journey is more like a flywheel. And so, Pete's looking in my leads and he's saying, hey, I want to change this inbound lead procedure. And I'm looking over at his, sales meetings going like, how can we support you and build like assets for you to help close the deals better? And I think when you have that kind of trust together, everything just goes so much better. There are so many fewer arguments. The funnel works better. You just are all on the same team working together. And in fact, that is one of the reasons that that a lot of people are putting the CMO and the customer success leader and the head of sales under one person, the CRO, or sometimes it's the COO or something, whatever. But it's because all of those functions need to be integrated rather than parallel silos. And Helena, I'd love to get your opinion on, like what do you see as like a really integrated function versus like closely coupled silos alongside sales and marketing?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, they really are just separate parts of one whole. And so treating them as totally separate means that you're never truly aligned. Like you constantly have to go back and double check, or as if you're wholly integrated and everything you're doing is seen as the full funnel instead of just like one in and one out. You're going to be more consistent. And it really is like it goes in cycles. They don't go out the door. And so that's kind of internally what I always tell our teams too. Like everyone needs to be aligned on how the customer is experiencing what you're putting out there, because they're going to come right back in. And at that point, you need to have earned the right to ask for more from them. And if you gave them an inconsistent experience, they're going to feel put off by it. They're not going to understand like what's going on because they're still trying to figure out how you're going to course correct for the garbage you gave them before. So I think that consistency really does rely on true alignment, not just checking a box that's like, oh, this guy again, like he wants me to change the way I'm doing leads or this. It's really like, let's talk about it and you need to align on it, figure out like, do we both agree that this is the best path forward? And then like, yeah, everyone is truly understanding what's supposed to come in and what's supposed to go out.
I love that. I think trust. If I could sum up what you said in one word, to me, it would be trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. I also like the ownership that you're taking in terms of saying like the customer doesn't care about our internal drama or communication. They just want a better experience. And you from the client side having experienced that is something I think a lot of teams forget. Um, but okay, I wanted to turn our attention to your cable TV analogy, which you brought up on the podcast with Amy on the Go to Market podcast. So we'll send out that podcast as well with the recording of this webinar. I absolutely love this. And the idea was that a lot like home entertainment, RevOps moved from like limited bundles to these 5,000 unbundled point solutions that it's now shifting back to consolidated platforms. And I think a phrase that we've heard before is a Frankenstack message, of a tech Frankenstack going on where you have all of that. The other thing that I liked, and I love this, was that idea of just that tool bloat where you can have all of these bells and whistles and touchscreens, but it's like adding a bunch of smart features to a refrigerator that doesn't keep anything cold. As you're looking at 2026, what's top of mind for you to avoid? Well, first of all, tell us more about that cable TV analogy, because I love that. I'm sure you're going to say it much better than I could. But tell us how you're thinking about, how do we get away from that, especially as all of these tools are now bolting on AI and presenting it like a new tool when really it's
Yeah.
just a feature on an old tool.
Yeah. And I mean, the cable TV concept was really just like, in my opinion, we're kind of following the same evolution that cable TV had, where it was a bunch of point solutions. Then those point solutions consolidated, and now you have fewer options. Or sorry, it went the opposite. You had fewer options, they were point solutions, and now it's going back to the consolidated options. But because there's overlapping capabilities, it's really difficult to prioritize and figure out which of those solutions is right for you and which combination makes sense, because they all sound like they cover what you need and then some. And the bells and whistles are usually, and in today's world, the bells and whistles are very much AI centric, but they all sound great. And so it's really hard to tease out, well, do I need this? Do I really need it? You can't really figure it out because it looks so pretty, and the way, and of course, like when it's pitched, it's in this ideal state of, and it does this and this, and you're not thinking about the stack of Frankenstein stuff you're already sitting on top of that your infrastructure can't even support it. You're just like, oh my God, yeah, sign me up, take my money, sign me up. And you kind of have to pause and be like, wait, what was I actually looking for? What did I want from you? And so I think what I do to anchor my search is to first very clearly have a point of view on what I'm trying to solve for. And that kind of goes back to reviewing, where is the actual problem? not where do I kind of think it is, or what are they arguing about? It's like figuring out like where do you actually have the issue, and then determining how much you're willing to solve that problem. Because I guarantee you don't have just one problem. You don't have two problems. You probably have a suite of friction points. Did they all need to be addressed together? Probably not. Ideally, would you? Sure. Totally. If someone gave you unlimited money, you could address everything at once, do a crazy tech stack and then cover all of it. Although I would argue, and this is maybe slightly separate, the tools don't fix everything, right? But realistically, you need to prioritize what those problems are, how much you're willing to spend, and the actual ROI you're going to get out of it. And that'll help you figure out, where should I focus my search? And so what are the problems, like the who, what, when, where, why, and then how of addressing the problem? Like, what are the problems? Where are your leaks and issues that you're trying to resolve? Why does the problem exist? Which is kind of alluding to what I said before, where like, is it a tooling problem, first of all, or is this more of an enablement issue? And if you get a tool that sounds really cool, and let's say it does solve that problem, do you have an ease of use issue with your current talent where you're going to struggle because they're inundated with a 5-step thing to do these other parts of their day, like their end-to-end day, and now you're adding 5 more steps and you're like, well, it sounds great, but when you actually sit down and think of their experiences, your customer, your user, it's not feasible. So think about those things as you're building it out. And I do this as kind of a matrix of all the different things we're trying to cover. And we overlay the tools that we're assessing to figure out where they cover and where they don't. Where are they strong? Where are they weak? What do they truly solve for? And what do they just say they solve for? And how likely is it that we'll see success specific to our infrastructure and our resourcing? They're not all the same. The same tool at different companies won't always see the same ROI. It's not the exact same situation. So be realistic about that too. Is this going to require you hire 2 more people? Then you probably are under calculating the cost to actually buying the tool. It's not the total cost as just your subscription line item. You need resources in order to make sure it's successful.
Helena, I loved like so many things about what you said, and a couple that resonated with me the most were that when you do like, back to your root cause analysis, you go back to what the actual problem is, because sometimes as RevOps people, we think, okay, well, these guys need this, but it's really a symptom of the underlying problem. So when you start solving for symptoms of the problem, then all of a sudden it's just like, it becomes a Frankenstack because you're trying to solve everybody's issues of what they perceive it is, maybe not what the root cause actually is. So I loved that point of it. I also loved your matrix. I would love to get your matrix and compare it with the one I use because, for me, I do, people, processes, technology, and data. And I always think of it in terms of that framework.
Yeah.
So I think like, and then in terms of like the total cost of ownership, like that was fabulously said too, because, if we're going to add 5 steps to the sales team for like a very minimal, better reporting, is it really worth it, right? If we're going to have to add 2 more implementation specialists in order to just get it done, if we're going to have to add 3 more marketing ops people to maintain the tool, all of a sudden that bloat, like you're talking about, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, and I thought you said that so well. And like you said, I think that the theme of this webinar so far is go back to the root and analyze it like you're a scientist. So, because we really are.
I also think it's important to be clear about, are you trying to be more effective or more efficient or both? Because that also will help you figure out what you're actually trying to solve for. And it's hard in ops because I think we typically tend to gear towards like, if you tell me it's efficient, I'm going to be really excited because that's like the premium. Everyone wants to get to the point where all you're doing is trying to improve and optimize efficiency. But realistically, you might actually just need something to be effective, even if it's slightly inefficient, because you just can't even get the thing done unless you have that. So I think keeping that lens clear as well is really important, that you're not getting bells and whistles that cater towards just efficiency, but the actual output isn't as effective or actionable as you might have wanted.
That's an excellent point. I love that.
Amy, I wanted to tackle this in 2 to 3 minutes, but from a slightly different angle, and really not to put you on the spot for a pitch of any kind, but Fullcast is interesting because in the last half of last year, you had 4 big acquisitions. And
Yes.
I could be wrong, but I feel like the reason that you were also bullish on buying those wasn't to buy 4 different point solutions, but to actually create a platform to solve the problems you were facing as a company. Am I way off on that?
No, I love what you said. So just a kind of a history of Fullcast, and Helena knows this because you've worked with our Fullcast plan product as well as now Copy AI, which is great. So when we thought about, we organically came to this conclusion because our customers were telling us, but then we also looked at the Forrester Wave one day and realized that our customers are telling us to build a full end-to-end SPM platform from plan to pay. And it was really interesting. So for example, when we had just Fullcast plan, it was it's the best in breed territories and quota management solution out there. But we needed to have the incentive compensation management. We needed to have the forecasting and deal intelligence. We needed to have the rep analysis with like the AI magic. And we needed to have a very strong AI solution, which we get with Copy. Now, with the Copy, for me, just going back into like using your own tech and doing what understanding efficient versus effective. When we acquired Copy AI, Nathan, you know this because you're part of the whole thing. We decided that we were going to go all in on it and we were going to really test it from the inside and see how it went. So the results after 2 months are 116% increase in organic traffic, 22% increase in organic keywords, 10-point increase in AI visibility, 500% increase in content production, 10x increase in leads, while cutting out $300K in cost and running 4 websites with a team of 4 employees. Like, that's insane. And the only way we could do it is because the tech is so good. And so for us, efficiency and effectiveness were both top of mind, but also it was really important for me to be able to be authentic and to be able to really test it and make sure that the tech that we had for our customers was really best in class. So
Well, it reminds me of what you'd said, Helena. Sometimes, like, it can look good on paper, but what is it actually going to do? And that can be such a fine line sometimes. And then you sometimes don't know how effective it will be until 6 months, and now it's too late because you're locked in a 3-year contracts, which can be tough. But anyway, okay, I could stick on all of these slides for way longer. You guys are both so easy to talk to. This is awesome.
oh, it's so much fun. And I think we have about 10 minutes left. And then if anyone has any questions, we could probably open it up for Helena if anyone does. So if you do, any participants here, please feel free to put in the chat any questions that you might have.
Yeah. So I'm curious. We all know about the before state. You have all of these different things before AI. One question that I really wanted to pose, Helena, is you're looking at either consolidating into a platform or figuring out how to solve some of these problems. As you're creating an annual plan, again, something can look really good on paper, and then 2 months later, AI has a new model come out, or a new feature come out, or a new platform, or 10,000 new platforms, as we saw last year. As you are solving for some of these things, what are you looking for in the solution specifically to help keep teams aligned, but also to help keep the data aligned? Because sometimes things are locked up in silos. We've seen, at least at Copy, one thing we were solving for is trying to make sure that sales legacy CRMs weren't just siloing its own data, and then you have the marketing team siloing their own data. How are you thinking about tackling these things as you are planning for a year when things can change so quickly month to month?
Yeah, I mean, from a tooling standpoint, from a technical perspective, I assess it based on the ability to like push and pull and aggregate data the way that I need. And, it can't just be that I like record by record, I can see what happened. I want to be able to aggregate it together and actually build insights that don't require me doing a bunch of extractions, cobbling it together, and then being able to take action on that. And so that's, it's not an obvious question in a lot of ways. We ask about integrations. So can you push data in and out? And like that's a common one, but and I've kind of learned this lesson the hard way, but just asking simple questions about like, show me what the analytics look like within this. Show me what it looks like if I'm trying to aggregate the data in a certain way. It's like what kind of reporting. And then I hate to say it, but one of the other things that's really important for tooling is it's kind of something you think about or you should think about in your everyday life too. In like dating, you never, they always say like you never truly know someone until you know them when you break up. The same concept is true for vendors. Like you should know up front, asking them like, well, what if we want to part ways? What does offboarding look like? Bulk extraction, like what kind of support do you give me? So from a tooling standpoint, understanding that because some of that information is not just yours, right? It can go across the different business units. And so they're going to want, even if like one business unit doesn't want that for historicals, another one might. And so that's a part of it as well, is making sure you're keeping that in mind. And then like from a workflow perspective, I think it's getting input from relevant stakeholders and using like a good cross section of usability across them. But that's kind of just like from a practical tooling perspective. The way that I kind of apply that to annual planning, I think, is typically thought of, and this was I think a byproduct of just limitations in tooling and support functions and capability. But we always looked at it as kind of a once a year type of thing. When in reality, we all know that it's not once a year because what you developed at the beginning of the year didn't necessarily serve you towards the end. And unless you're in an incredibly large and very mature organization that doesn't deviate a whole lot, which is like a unicorn, if you're there, please let me know if you're hiring. But I think for the most part, most of us have to understand how to pivot and be agile throughout the year. And um, that's challenging. So knowing not just can I set the plan, but do I have the ability and the resources to pivot? And we've kind of talked about this to a degree before, but like annual planning, in my opinion, is still kind of needed. It's still a thing that sets your framework, but having the ability to layer in things that come from AI that give you signals to act more as your, like if annual planning is your map, your AI gives you signals that are your GPS, that layer in like urgency and direction on top of, hey, we know who we need to go after. We know how much we need to close. We know generally where those accounts are. You can layer in the ability to navigate directly to insights that tell you the who at that point in time. And so there's kind of a temporal aspect of AI that you now have that we didn't have before. And so leveraging that, I think, is really important and really useful for what we're doing, that allows you to not have to do a bunch of rework because you're still using the same skeleton, but you can navigate and pivot pretty quickly and not let the administrative burden weigh you down.
I love that. And I imagine a lot of teams get caught in that administrative weight, so to speak. Um, Amy, I was wondering, in your experience, because you've been doing this for, I forget how long were you running the agency? 15 years?
15 years. I've been in this business for over 30 years, you guys. It's been a long time, and it's been so fun to watch, but also I'm kind of old.
No, not at all. Are you kidding? There's a it's so funny you say that. This I've never seen Amy sleep. She doesn't sleep. I don't know how she doesn't show up so composed to these things. It's incredible.
No.
In those 30 years, my question would be, do you think AI has changed the need for the speed at which teams pivot, or have teams always just needed to pivot quickly? They just struggled to do so.
Well, I think it's a great question. I think AI definitely has, like, the whole, technology, digital transformation has sped everything up, right? They say that the just technology itself doubles every 3 years, right? And so, I do think that we're going to have to pivot more quickly with AI. The expectations rise alongside the technology. But I also think that there are some things that we can do much more easily now that we weren't able to before. So, I actually, someone posted in the chat a question for Helena, that is kind of relevant to what you're saying here. What topics or questions should RevOps be asking that they normally don't when entering a new business? So if you are entering a new business, Helena, you're taking a new job,
Mhm.
what questions should you ask that people don't normally ask?
Um, that is a good question. I
Isn't
mean,
that a
it's
great
not,
question?
yeah, it's not even just kind of one. Like, I think there's, my first like 30 to 60 days at any job, and I do it continuously, but very heavily when I first start is just doing a gap analysis of like what's working, what's not. And I think we all generally do that. I think one of the things that I try and do earlier rather than later as a part of it is try and ask, but go source. Do you have any of the source documented anywhere in terms of policies, in terms of logic, in terms of what you expected? Because what I've found in a lot of different places is that if you just do it off of what was built and you're like, well, that's not working. Clearly, like either the lead routing's not working, your scoring model's not working, your this isn't working, your that's not working. Like obviously the output looks like maybe it's not working. You have
Mm-hmm.
to know where they tried to start because that'll save you a lot of time. And what I found was if you just make assumptions and you're like, oh, well, this isn't working, it should be X, Y, and Z, it
Mm-hmm.
could be, and you decide like I need to completely rebuild something. It could have been that the intent was actually something slightly different than what you're gleaning from what you see on the output that really requires minimal adjustment rather than complete destruction and rebuild. And that saves a lot of time. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
who you go ask that to. It really is just everybody. It depends on the specific thing you're trying to accomplish, but it is worth going back and kind of digging in and asking people not just like what worked and what didn't, but like where were you told to do this and figure out was it a disconnect in what they were told or is it an actual disconnect in execution?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it's some blend of those and that's not always obvious when you're doing it. You kind of when you're doing a gap analysis, a lot of it is just like, well, what was the output like? Did this work? Or it's why is this all Frankenstein together? But it's because you're missing a little piece of the puzzle that isn't obvious to get.
That's so relevant. And sometimes it used to be there, but somebody left and there was a
Right.
single point of failure. And so that gap is now there, so that no longer works.
Or
It's
there's a whole
interesting.
new tool that was
Mhm.
connected that wasn't obviously there and that did the thing that would have bridged the gap between
Yeah.
the two pieces and it's no longer either being kept up or whatever. But yeah, that's you don't know the whole
Yeah.
picture.
I also love what you said about trying to tweak things rather than blow everything up.
Yeah.
There's a tendency, like when there's a new acquisition or when there's like a change of hands. I have had a lot of people like when I've moved on after we from a company after the acquisition and you go through that transition period or whatever. I hear things from the marketing team that still stays where like the new head of marketing is like, we're going to do everything completely different. Everything that was done in the past was horrible. And it's a natural tendency to want to do that because you want to stake your own claim and have your own team. But if you can just go in there, like you say, and be more surgical and scientific about it and say, what is working? What is not working? Why was this gap? Why is this gap here? And what used to be here? Then it'll save you a lot of time and energy and money.
It also, I think, builds your adaptability, which is really important. I think that tendency to rebuild things also comes from an area of comfort. You've done it a certain way, you know it works, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. It doesn't mean that it's the only way that works either. And so I kind of take it as a challenge, where
Mhm.
what I want to leave behind is better than what I inherited, but only because I've made it more polished, I've made it more mature, not because I branded it as mine because I ripped out something old for the sake of ripping it out and having my name slapped on it. I don't think that's helpful. And I also don't think it builds people's skill to understand where should I be spending my time and where am I best spent just making small adjustments and getting the most out of what I've already built.
Yeah, I really love that. I can't tell you how many times I have put in solutions for inside sales that where they had HubSpot and then they wanted
Yeah.
Outreach and then
Yep.
they wanted Salesforce and then they wanted Zoom Info and then they wanted to go back to HubSpot.
Yeah. And it's a comfort level. They're like, oh, I
Totally.
like this. And you're like, well, why do you like it? And they're like, this screen looks nice. I'm like, all right, get out of here.
Well, and sometimes it's okay, right? Sometimes it's like, hey, if
Yeah.
you're going to be that much more efficient, go for it. But I think that there, like you say, it has to be a combined effort between
Yeah.
the people and the processes and the time that's going to be spent putting it together versus the training and enablement for maybe a different tool. So I thought what you said was totally relevant. I loved it.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left. I have a few more slides. We're obviously not going to get to them. I'm going to get one more question. We talked about the tooling. This is where I really wanted to ask both of your perspective in the last 3 minutes. And I tend to over prepare. It's like when I used to go on first dates in college, I would bring note cards because I was scared the conversation would go bad. And
That's the cutest thing I've ever heard.
no, it was horrible. And like on the bad dates, I'd be done with all my note cards before like the appetizers came. And on good ones, you just toss out the note cards. And this was a great interaction. I feel like I just way over.
Nathan, I have like 90 follow-up questions to that. So we're going to have to set up a class. What was the second date like and how many of those existed?
Yeah, not many of those exist, unfortunately. But I'll ask my wife what got her to go on the second date with me.
Yeah, and ask her which cards she liked and what she
Which
note cards.
Oh, yeah.
Which note card? Oh gosh. Okay, my question really is that bottom line impact. Where do you see AI having the largest impact on actual go-to-market success rather than what is possible on paper? Where do you see AI really having the biggest, from a RevOps perspective, having the biggest impact, helping teams go to market more efficiently and effectively? Excuse me.
Should I go first?
Sure, go for it.
I mean, I think AI, I think it's going to do it in a couple ways. One, I think it kind of requires that there's a bit of shared prioritization, that collaboration that was missing before. I think it makes it easier to do, but it's also required if you want AI to be effective because you need to like agree on your definitions. And I think in a lot of ways, especially like marketing and sales, you have overlapping priorities, but slightly different. Like marketing, I think, is optimizing for engagement, and I think sales is optimizing for pipeline. And so like it sounds like you're doing the same thing, but realistically, you might not actually be thinking of things the same way. And so I think AI can be used as like a prioritization signal that both entities can agree on and use to stop debating like what accounts or what leads or whatever matter, and they can focus more on the how to do it, not the what. And it removes some of the subjective decision making. Again, it's not like I and this is maybe a hot take, but like I don't think AI should be a way that you outsource critical thinking. I think you still want decision making and you want logic and power to be with humans, but I think that it alleviates some of the decision fatigue or burden and creates a way to see signal from noise so that you're not bickering across like a broad range of things. It's just giving you a direction to go after it. And as long as you agree on what logic is used for that direction, it can make everyone a lot more efficient and a lot more effective. And I think that removes some of that friction point that was there before, where even if you agreed on definitions, if you didn't have something that was layered across both, you still could potentially go off and start deviating from the plan, and there's nothing really course correcting you. And everything is like a personal input of like, yes, I qualify this. Yes, I think this, and I think that's important. But there's nothing standardizing that across the teams. And this AI kind of helps do that quicker and allows you to pivot it, as you're kind of gut checking it and testing, like, was this valid or not? It takes very minor adjustments to start tweaking it and getting more output from it.
I love that so much. I won't talk.
Well said. Well said. For me, the AI is an exceptional execution engine, but like Helena said, the critical thinking needs to stay with humans.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been saying as a team, never outsource your thinking to AI, only
Yeah.
outsource the structure of your thoughts. And I think you're right. It's really a great gut check. I can't tell you how many teams I've gotten to work with over the past 2 years where I'll say, hey, give me an example of the quality you want to make. And they'll say, I don't really have a good example of the quality I want. And if you don't have it in hand, it's hard to replicate it with AI or execute against it. So you really have to have those beforehand questions thought out first. That's a great, really.
Yeah. Well, and think about it this way. Have you ever tried to make a picture in AI? I mean, it's better now than it was before, but I remember first trying to have ChatGPT create like a headshot for me. And I asked it to make a more professional headshot, and it added 2 extra heads and a weird baby floating in the background. Like, oh, great job. And when you do that, you can very quickly visualize how horrible it was at it. But think about when someone's doing that, like just in text or in writing, and they're not still a human layer of quality assurance and checking that like sanity checking that this makes sense. That, 2-headed monstrosity would have gone out the door. But because it's not visualized, it's harder to pick up if you don't have someone in there going, yep, look good, or nope, this needs more work. So the next time you go send an AI generated note, just make sure you didn't send a 2-headed baby out the door.
That is
Or maybe that's what you want. What do I know? I don't know you.
That is a great actionable tip. Don't send 2-headed baby messages anymore. That's great. We are officially 3 minutes over. I have been a terrible moderator in terms of time, but I just got lost in the conversation, and I can't thank you both enough for being here and sharing. Helena, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're busy. How can people get a hold of you best? Would LinkedIn be the best way?
Yeah, I'm on
Reach out,
LinkedIn.
say hi,
Yeah.
connect. Okay. Amy,
Totally.
same thing. You give out your phone number sometimes in your emails. You're crazy when you do that.
I do. I text people all the time that I
Amy, that is unhinged behavior.
No. Well, that's why I don't sleep.
That's
Well,
it's also why our customers get such great service. It's very neat to see. I've never seen that before. So thank you both so
Thank
much.
you so much. I really
We
appreciate
appreciate this.
it. Thank you, Helena. Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.